All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Charlie Taylor. I'm one of the CE consultants here at KDLA. I'm going to be facilitating today's webinar. I'd just want to do a little bit of housekeeping here at the beginning, and then we'll get right into the presentation. While I'm talking, if you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and take our poll there about what sort of activities, what things, let us know in the chat, I'm sorry, about what activities your library is doing related to the GED. We've got some good feedback so far, and we hope to get you lots of new ideas today as well. Also, let us know in our poll, do you already have patrons that you know of taking the GED online at your library? If you haven't had a chance to download the handout for today's presentation, you can do that in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, and we'll also make that available at the end of today's presentation. This is being recorded, and it will be posted on our archived webinars page within a week, most likely sooner than that, but you'll be able to go back and review any of the information or share it with your coworkers, whatever you'd like to do with that. And at the end of the presentation, I'll do a little wrap-up again and just remind you, you will be getting, if you're one of our live participants, a certificate of attendance for today. So it looks like most of you are saying you're pretty sure you don't have any patrons taking the GED online at your library. Some of you are not sure. So the only one person saying yes. So that looks like we've got a ways to go today. So that's good. We're going to learn lots of great new things today. So I want to go ahead and introduce our presenter today. His name is Mike Fair. He is the team librarian with the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. He used to be in Kentucky for a very long time, as we were talking before our presentation, most recently with Campbell County Public Library. So we want to extend a big thank you to Mike today. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Charlie. As Charlie mentioned, I was at the Campbell County Public Library for 5 years, although it actually seemed like twice as long. And during my time there, I worked with some GED takers, learned quite a bit about the GED test, and I'm happy to share some of that information with you today. The GED is a really exciting topic to talk about because it's kind of at the heart and soul of library services. We're talking about adult education. We're talking about education through non-structured, non-traditional means, self-guided education. And that's kind of goes along with that lifelong learning, which is one of those pillars of library service. So we're going to talk about the GED in the 21st century today. To understand the GED in the 21st century, we need to understand the 2014 GED. In 2014, GED Testing Service revised the test for only the 4th time since 1942. So from those numbers, we can conclude that revisions are very rare. So not only was it one of the only revisions, it was actually the biggest revision so far. A lot of the changes had to do with the content of the test. It became focused less on memorization and more on problem solving and reasoning and skills that look towards college education and other post-secondary institutions. Perhaps even a bigger change, though, and probably more relevant to libraries in Kentucky, is that the test is now only available on a computer. So there is no paper version of the GED. Now there's a little bit of confusion in the wording on that poll we talked about before the webinar. The poll asked if anyone was taking the GED online at your library. To my understanding, and it was at least this way as of April of this year, the GED is not offered online. It's offered, but it is computer-based. So it's not something you could take at home, and not something you could take on one of the library's traditional computer labs. But we will see at the web, as the webinar progresses, that there are some libraries that actually are testing centers. I know in Northern Kentucky, a lot of the GED takers go to Gateway's testing center in Florence. For some people, finding a GED testing center requires quite a bit of transportation. So that's just one of the many hurdles in GED takers planning for their future, developing their education. And with those hurdles is certainly things that are in line in the computer skills realm. First, let's talk about the benefits. Certainly, there are benefits to offering a online computer-only GED. Things like online registration and instant scoring. But of course, there is a lot of disadvantage too. Mainly that when you talk about GED takers, you're talking about a population that is oftentimes resistant to computer use or is not able to access a computer either because of the high cost of technology or the skills involved like mousing, clicking on links, opening and closing files. I want to stay on this slide for a little bit. Here are some numbers. If you're like me and a lot of us who work in the library world are this way, we love numbers, we love stats, we love research that people at great organizations like Pew do. So I have two bullet points up here. 13% of U.S. adults do not use the internet. That number might seem surprising. It's surprising to me every time I look at it, even though I've seen that number quite a lot of times. But according to Pew, 13% of adults do not use the internet, and 34% of these adults who aren't online have less than a high school education. Now, I'm going to ask the audience to make a leap with me here. And I want them to draw a conclusion or correlation between internet use and computer use. As we know, computers are not the internet, and internet is not computers. However, I do think in this day and age, when you're talking about internet use, you're also talking about computer skills and access along with that. Certainly there's more to a computer than the internet. There are games and Microsoft Office Suite and productivity software. But I think when you look at how the internet has affected our lives in 2017, from the way we watch television to the way we talk to people, you're talking about the internet as one of those core skills. And if we know that 13% of U.S. adults do not use the internet, I'm going to wager a guess that a very similar number would be the adults who do not use or own or feel comfortable on a computer. So that's a hill I will die on. Some people can choose to agree or disagree with me, but I'm going to go ahead and draw that conclusion. And then the other number that's interesting is when you look at adults that aren't online, about 34% have less than a high school education. And we find this is about 3 times greater than the computer using population. So what does this mean? Well, it just means that the population that's taking the GED is traditionally not our most computer savvy, and yet they need computer skills to accomplish this goal, which is going to be a stepping stone to them doing greater things in life, which includes affording and being able to have access to technology. When we look at Kentucky, we find that Kentucky ranks number 43 in states with household computer use. So this is an issue that should be close to all of us, since I think we're all here in Kentucky, or close by in my case. And if you look at the other number, I think it validates my point a little bit that number 41 is very close to 43. We see that we're number 41 in states that use high-speed internet at home. So again, drawing that connection between computer use and internet use. And Malta says, would you say that the number of adults in more rural areas of our state is higher than 34%? I don't have those numbers, but yes, I would say that in Kentucky, that's an issue that's going to be relevant to a lot of our libraries, is that you've got that rural areas, and access to technology is an issue, as is transportation. Your rural areas are going to be those areas where people have to drive 2 hours to a testing center. They're going to be areas that don't have the fiber optic cables that are necessary for high-speed internet. Again, what we're seeing here time and time again is that that divide, that digital divide, is growing, and the tools that are necessary for improving your life are often unavailable to the folks who need them the most. Another way to put it, the American Community Survey in 2014 showed that more than any other variable, education and income are predictors of whether a household will have internet. In households where a resident has a bachelor's degree or higher, 96% own computers, with 90% using high-speed internet connections at home. And again, sometimes it seems like even more than that. And the bold statement below that says, in households where no one has a high school diploma, computer ownership was 56% and internet usage was 43%. Again, very close link between internet usage and computer ownership, and also a much greater number of folks with less than a high school education not having access to computer and internet technology. So this is something we're very familiar with in libraries. This should be a surprise to nobody. We all work every day to bridge the digital divide I mentioned earlier, that growing disparity among people of higher socioeconomic standing possessing greater access and usage of the internet compared to those of lower socioeconomic standing. Unfortunately, income is only part of the problem. Some people out there can absolutely afford a computer and absolutely afford an expensive monthly internet subscription. They're just resistant to it because of computer anxiety. Again, should be no surprise to librarians and information professionals. I've worked with a lot of people in different library systems, in computer class settings as well as one-on-one training environments. Sometimes computers, well, I should say a lot of times computers, they may put people on edge, hostile even. You have a lot of people come to the reference desk in a traditional library and say things about themselves being computer illiterate, or sometimes they'll even use the word stupid. It's sad. It's sad to hear people talk about themselves that way. Unfortunately, something about the interface of using a computer makes us doubt ourselves. I even had issues this morning getting into this webinar, and I work partially as a person who helps people facilitate their use on a computer. We compare it to, say, you're taking your driver's test and you walk in on the first day and the driver's test is in Spanish. Technology certainly is another language. And for the GED taker in 2017, they don't only have to worry about the social studies, math, and science portion of it, but they also have to learn about computer skills, mousing, opening links, saving files, minimizing windows, and resizing text. So trying to paint a picture here of GED takers being vulnerable to these changes that were made on the GED, and the numbers prove this. In 2014, high school equivalency testing dropped by 50%. So half of the people who took the GED in 2013 took it in 14. And partially that change can be attributed to the more difficult content, but certainly also the testing methods of being online or computer-based only. The numbers I think show that. There was a decrease in people who passed the GED test. And this is interesting. A University of Tennessee study in 2016 showed that 49% of people preferred a paper-based GED test, with only 26% preferring a computer-based test. And again, like I said, I love numbers, and in this case, they add up beautifully because you have 49% of people preferring a paper-based test and a 50% drop in the 2014 takers of the GED. 61% of the respondents to the study reported that they do not have access to a computer in their home. And 7% reported that they were unable to access a computer anywhere. We may be skeptical of that 7% number, especially since we're all librarians and information professionals. We all know of one place where you can access a computer, and that's the public library. Of course, as Malta mentioned, in our rural parts of the state, folks might be a long distance from a library. They might be 30 or 40 minutes by car ride, a car they may or may not have. Don't forget, we find that with GED takers, transportation is also an issue as well as computer access. And then we have folks whose library cards are barred from using the computer because of fines or fees for lost items. I think another thing we see with GED takers is this sort of frequent relocating of the home, and in that instance, library materials tend to get lost. And then if your library does not permit people with fines using their computer, they would have that avenue stripped from them as well. This would be a good time to take a little break. Do libraries in Kentucky have plans for letting people with fines use the computers? I've worked in libraries where you've logged onto the computer with your library card. I've worked in libraries where, at the Campbell County Library, where you couldn't use the computer if your card had more than $10 in fines. At my current employer, the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County, fines don't affect computer usage. So things are kind of different across the board. I know the Kenton and Campbell libraries offer people with more than $10 in fines but less than $25 to pay $1 for a guest pass. That will let them use the computer, and that dollar goes to their fines. Okay, and Aaron says they allow people to use their computers irregardless of fines. I think that's the way to go, because oftentimes these are people who are searching for jobs where they will earn money to pay for their fines, and if you can't get the job, you can't pay for the fine, and you can't use the computer. A lot of those times we see this kind of snake eating its own tail metaphor, and I think a lot of people feel like they are dug into a large hole. We want to help them get out, not dig farther. So how do you solve a problem like the 2014 GED? And Malta's got, seems to be a library that has a conditional policy where schoolwork and job searching are allowed. That sounds like probably the best way to go, but often a nightmare to monitor what can be classified as schoolwork and job hunting. I'm sure it gets very creative at Malta's workplace. So I want to talk a little bit about and Betty says more than $5. That seems like the strictest one I've heard, but they do allow for schoolwork and job hunting. So I want to talk a little bit about a collaboration I was involved with at the Campbell County Public Library, collaborating with the Adult Learning Center. The Adult Learning Center, so this is where we move on from the doom and gloom of our earlier slides and all those statistics and talk about some positives, some way that libraries can help GED takers. One of those ways is partnerships. With my previous job at the Campbell County Public Library, I partnered with the Adult Learning Center. This is an entity that shares a building with Newport Middle School, if you're familiar with the Newport, Kentucky area. It's an adult education center that offers classes for free of cost to people who have dropped out of high school or ended their high school education prematurely. And classes are geared towards the GED. They teach math, science, English, and they also talk a lot about that GED testing interface. So I worked with them for about a year before I left Campbell County in a number of ways. Some days involving visits, outreach visits to the Adult Learning Center. Other days they would come to us. and hold a GED practice test. And as I'll show in some of my slides, there was a bit of cross-promotion between the two entities. So I worked with the Adult Learning Center on a monthly schedule. I'd visit one day a month, and they would give me an hour of floor time to talk about resources the library had for GED takers and adult education students. Not a whole lot different than a teen librarian might do a book talk at a school. Might visit a school and say, hey, this is what the library has to offer. It was just like doing a book talk, except we would do tech talks. We would offer, talk about different technology resources the library has, in particular offered to GED takers. And one of those are the ebooks through Overdrive and Libby apps. So I just would offer a word of caution there to be familiar with what's in your library's electronic catalog, because if it's a Peterson's or Kaplan guide from prior to 2014, it won't be as helpful. You want to look for those 2014 and later guides. But fortunately at Campbell, we had quite a few of those Kaplan, Peterson test guides, even the dummies guide for the GED, which, you know, the Dummies series it offers a lot of entertainment when you look at their titles. They offer like anger management and parenting, and certainly the GED test for dummies is enough to raise eyebrows, but that's why it sells. It's memorable. In addition to ebooks, the library has a number of databases that are very relevant to GED takers. We were lucky at Campbell County to have two really good ones, Gale Courses, which I have a slide on later, and Learning Express Library. So we talk about those as just the way that we would talk about books with high school and elementary school students. Now, ebooks through the Overdrive and Libby apps and database usage through the library's website require a library card. When you visit the Adult Learning Center, you hear a number of things. One, I have a library card and I love to use the library. Unfortunately, another thing you'll hear is I don't have a library card because I don't have a photo ID and the library is not on a bus line and I don't get out there very much. And the third thing you hear is I have a library card with more fines than I'm allowed to have, and I'm prohibited from using the library. We had a good workaround for both of those obstacles at the Campbell County Library. The digital patron card. If you get a chance at some point in your free time, and you can visit the Campbell County Library's website at cc-pl.org. Don't forget the dash between CC and PL, otherwise you'll visit another library. But one of our cards we offered, in addition to an adult, children, or homebound card, was a digital patron card. This is a card that allowed you to check out ebooks. It allowed you to access a database, and it allowed you to check out digital magazines through Zenio. Which, before I get too carried away on the digital patron card, I also want to mention Zenio and Comics Plus apps when talking about GED students, because a lot of times you're talking about high-interest readers, and you're talking about people who maybe will be more inclined to read something that's shorter and something that's more interested in them than classic literature or whatever else you're trying to promote. And it broke up the day too. Whatever you can do to get people interested is always important. So a way you can access those digital magazines, digital comics, library databases, and ebooks was a digital patron card, which, unlike the adult, children's, or homebound cards, did not require a photo ID or proof of address. In fact, you couldn't require those things because you filled out your library card and received your barcode and PIN number from your home computer. Great thing about the digital card, kind of a secret handshake, was that since you're not proving who you are, all you needed was a unique name and birthday. So if you did have a card that had, say, $200 in lost items on it, you could absolutely get a digital card if you, say, changed a day in your birthday or a middle initial in your name. Of course, we didn't encourage people to do this, but it would have happened to slip out in promotion of the digital patron card that all you needed was a unique name and birth date. So this would be kind of classic cross-promotion. Basically, you're looking at your ebooks, you're looking at who's using them, you're looking at who's not using them, you're finding a great audience, I think, GED takers. You're talking about free ebooks. In some cases, of course not all, in some cases though, you're talking about books that are always available and not something you have to catch when it's on the shelf or place on hold and pick up when it comes back. Of course, we know that books through Overdrive and Libby aren't always available. Sometimes they're on waiting lists too, but some of the databases had always available ebooks. Another thing and Aaron says that he's got the computer use card for this purpose. It's a great way to bring people into the library. And again, there's no risk because, you can't lose an ebook. You can't damage a database. There's really no risk in it. So I say give out the cards and give them out often. Did a few other things with the Adult Learning Center in Newport. We did a resume writing workshop from time to time. So again, not completely focused on GED only. This was kind of what comes next. Once you get your GED, what do you want your resume to look like? And oftentimes you're dealing with resumes that are light on work experience and have gaps in them and things like education. And if you Google it, there are definitely ways to list the GED on a resume. So that was our visits to the Adult Learning Center. But the exciting part of the partnership was that the Adult Learning Center also visited the library's 3 locations in Cold Spring, Fort Thomas, and Newport, and they would offer a practice test. Wonderful idea. Certainly everybody has testing anxiety on any level, whether it's, the GRE, the SAT, and the GED. So taking a practice test certainly puts minds at ease, lets you know what you need to work on, gives you a heads up about just the interface. And what we had in mind was that cross-promotion, the mutual publicity for both organizations. The goal was that library users would see this event on our calendar and say, hey, what's the Adult Learning Center? I need to find out about that and become students there. And then on the other side of that, Adult Learning Center students would maybe travel to one of the 3 library locations for the first time ever or the first time in years. So that was our partnership. That was the partnership between the Campbell County Public Library and the Adult Learning Center in Newport, Kentucky. Want to talk about what some other libraries are doing. Next is my current employer, the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. And it turns out what we're doing is actually very similar to what the Campbell County Library did and is currently still doing. Offering GED classes presented in partnership with another nonprofit organization. So instead of the Adult Learning Center, it's the Great Oaks Institute of Technology and Career Development. And again, it's very similar services, but just under different names. We offered Gale Courses and Learning Express Library as databases. The Public Library of Cincinnati Hamilton County has a Testing, Education, and Reference Center, which has practice tests. And want to mention this last one, web links. Not hard to make a web link. It might be hard to get your IT department or web developers to agree to putting more content on your website, but in terms of library programming, it's certainly on the passive side. Still very important. So you could actually have a part in your website that says something like education or our community or resources, and it would just be links to your nonprofit organizations like the Adult Learning Center, links to the Testing Center, links to where you can take the GED. And just have this as part of a sub-menu on your library's website. And again, there's a balance there because with the rise of mobile technology like phones and tablets, we tend to like our websites to be clean and streamlined and not have all that extra stuff on them. But I think the passive things are really important to offer in addition to those classes and practice tests. Passive things like web links and shelf talkers are there for the folks who may be too shy to come up to the reference desk and ask about resources for taking the GED. And sadly, for a lot of people, not having a high school education carries a stigma. And when they walk into an educational resource like the library, they can feel intimidated and inadequate the same way that I feel when I enter a Lowe's or a Home Depot. We all know it's hard to ask for help sometimes. The Sacramento Public Library in California offers classes on computer skills needed to take the GED. And that's very important. Remember, there's two sides to this coin. There's the GED itself, which has 4 sections on science, social studies, math, and reading. There's also the computer skills. Remember, the big audience in this initiative are folks that want to get their GED so they can better their lives, but they don't have the technology or technology skills that's required for that. So you're talking about things like mousing, opening and closing programs, and changing text size. One of the very interesting things that my friends at the Adult Learning Center shared with me is that when you're talking about GED takers, you're talking about a lot of cases of undiagnosed dyslexia. So one of the computer skills needed to take the GED would just be to increase your text size or use dyslexia fonts, which they do offer on the GED's website. Sacramento Public Library is also offering one-on-one tutoring help with reading and writing. What I'm not sure about in that is if that's a library staff member or a community partner. Not only would that take staff time to offer that service, but then you're also talking about the training and skills in reading tutoring, which carry their own expertise. Okay, the Dallas Public Library is a bit of a star in GED services. This is really exciting. The Dallas Public Library offers a GED scholarship. This is a partnership with Atmos Energy. So this is the first private sector for-profit entity we're bringing into the fold here. So certainly something like a grant or partnership. Because don't forget, it actually costs money to take the GED. $135 for the whole test or $35 for a section. Most of the GED takers I've talked to have taken the test in 4 quarters, $35 a section, and they most certainly always save the math for last. That's the big one. We talked about the pass rate going down in 2014 from 3/4 to 2/3. That's a bummer for these GED takers because not only is it the time they've invested, but also the cost in taking the test. So not only is the Dallas Public Library offering the scholarship, they're actually offering a venue where GED takers can take the GED. That's right, the Dallas Public Library is a testing center, which in a state like Texas, I would think would be a big asset because of its size. I mentioned the Gateway Testing Center in Florence, Kentucky. You know, it's about a 40-minute drive from my home, probably farther for some folks in rural areas. And again, that's one more barrier. In addition to becoming a testing center, one really, really fun thing the Dallas Public Library does is hold a graduation ceremony for people who pass their GED and get their diploma. And they're not the only ones. The Adult Learning Center in Newport does the same thing. It's a big deal for these people. Sometimes this is a process that's been years in the making, and they want to celebrate. And you know, a lot of times families will come out, take pictures, and recognize that accomplishment, as they should. So this is certainly not a comprehensive list. This is all I could fit into my slide. These are some libraries across the country that are currently offering GED classes or were as of April of this year, which is when I created this slideshow. Like I said, it's not all of them. It's all that would fit into the slide. There are certainly more, but of course I had to cut it off somewhere. And again, the reason there's so many is because, one, it's a great service to offer your library patrons, but number two, there's a lot of ways to offer a GED class. You can offer the reading, science, and math skills needed to take the GED, as well as the computer skills needed, like mousing and opening and closing programs. So what else can you do? The things we talked about are pretty big. They're definitely on the active side. You know, a GED graduation ceremony requires renting out your library's meeting room, requires having a meeting room, which some of our smaller one-branch libraries might not have. Or if you're in a Carnegie building or something built before 2000 when meeting room space became more of a trend, that might not be an option. So what can you do? Here's a few things on the passive side. The GED tutorial is something that's offered through the GED Testing Service website. There is a URL on the top of that slide. So hopefully you've downloaded your slides or your handouts, and this would be a part of that. This is the part of the test that focuses on the computer competencies, advancing one screen to the next, entering things in text boxes, drop-down menus. And again, you know, I had that moment of panic this afternoon when I went to the Adobe Connect link and couldn't get in. And I'm someone who considers myself to be very, very proficient at computer use. I put together the amazing slideshow you're watching. That's just one example of the computer skills I've gained in my lifetime. I can't imagine taking a test that's going to have such an impact on my life as the GED would, and have to learn and negotiate these choppy waters of digital technology, which we know sometimes has no rhyme or reason to it. Case in point, we know as library users that to launch an icon from the desktop, we double-click it, but to open it from our status bar, we single-click it. I only mention that as an example of things in the digital realm rarely make sense. So there is a practice interface on the GED's website, which focuses not on the reading, math, and science, but the computer competencies. Some libraries might want to create a shortcut on this to their library's desktop. So just along with your Google Chrome and your Microsoft Word icons, you could have GED tutorial. The previous library I worked at in Campbell County had a lot of local links on their desktop, like schools AR tests. Again, it's a balance. You want it to be streamlined. You don't want to fill up your entire desktop with icons, but I think something like the GED tutorial could certainly have a place, if not on your public computer's desktop, certainly on those web links we talked about. Other web links you can provide, testing centers, certainly testing centers. I had no idea where One Takes the Ged before I delved into it last year. Websites for local classes, you know, it's very easy to find free GED classes if you live in a metropolitan area, like the Newport Adult Learning Center we talked about. tutors, testing facilities, databases. You can include all kinds of things in a list of web links. If you look at other libraries, like the Cincinnati Library or the Dallas Public Library, these are pages you'll see on their website. And then there's subscription databases. We were lucky at the Campbell County Library to have two great ones, Gale Courses and the Learning Express Library. Feel free to chime in the chat if you'd like to. I wonder who's familiar with Gale Courses. Hopefully some other libraries offer it because it's one of the neatest, most robust databases I've ever come across in library services. It offers 6-week courses, and those are instructor-led. So if you've taken an online class through any high school or university, it's very similar. They do last on a 6-week calendar. An instructor assigns reading and gives out assignments. And at the end of 6 weeks, you've gained this skill, and it can be anything from Microsoft Excel to digital photography, and it does include the GED. Best part is it's absolutely free for the patrons. They just log in with a library card and PIN, create a username, and of course that could be its own mountain to climb if you're talking about folks that aren't skilled in computers. But once you get your login information, you can take two different GED courses, one on the general GED test and one that focuses specifically just on the math. And as I mentioned earlier, the math test is the big one. That's the one that GED takers put off till last, fail the most, and oftentimes just experiences the largest sense of dread before taking. So Gale Course is a great place to learn not just about the GED, not just the reading, math, and social studies, but also a great place to learn computer skills. I took a Gale course on Windows 10, less to learn how to use it, but I was at the time just curious about how you approach this puzzle of teaching digital technology to people. I wanted to hear how other people put into words things like launching programs, things like clicking on links, parts of the computer like the control panel and the start menu. So as an educator, I kind of moonlighted in a Windows 10 course and leaned on it quite a bit later on when I had to teach Windows 10. And at the Campbell County Library, all of the librarians were always in one or two Gale courses. It's one of those things that is free, and if you don't use it, it's kind of wasted. But more importantly, I heard good feedback from patrons too. Had a lot of patrons who took a Gale course religiously and had good things to say about them. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Gale courses. The only drawback that I can think of is the time investment. If you're taking the GED in 2 weeks, you probably don't have 6 weeks to spend on a Gale course. You can work ahead. You know, I think it's perfectly feasible to join a Gale course 2 weeks late and catch up. It's not really on the university level, so I wouldn't say that you're going to pull any all-nighters taking a Gale course. But they do take time, and if you don't have 6 weeks to take a Gale course, if you need information now, you might want to look at the Learning Express Library. Learning Express Library is a very robust database. That's one when you go to its front page, you see a wheel, not unlike the Price is Right wheel, that you can spin and designate an area of Learning Express like high school, college, careers, ESL, or GED. And the GED portion of Learning Express Library offers quite a bit, digital ebooks. So earlier I talked about Overdrive and Libby and all of the great test prep books that are in there. Well, those take quite a bit of technology needs. You have to have a tablet or a phone with Overdrive app on it. You have to have a library card. You have to have um, have the book be checked in and available to you. The ebooks through Learning Express Library are in PDF format, and they're always available, and they're good too. They're 100 pages or more, very robust. As are the practice tests. You can take a practice test and a skills test in Learning Express Library. Here at the Cincinnati Library, we offer a similar database called the Testing and Education Reference Center, which has both practice tests and ebooks in it. The Testing and Ed Center has not just the GED, but also the HiSET and the TASC test. And those are two other high school equivalency tests. So when we talk about the GED, there's a lot of different aspects to it. One is whether you're taking the GED itself or a comparable test like the HiSET. To my knowledge, the HiSET is not available in Kentucky. The HiSET and the TASC are available from state to state, and I believe the GED is the only game in town in Kentucky. Someone might want to correct me in the chat if they know different, or they might want to stay on your toes because these things can change. Okay, so the Testing and Ed Reference Center, Gale Courses, Learning Express Library, they're very robust databases, and as they are very robust, they also cost an arm and a leg. At libraries like the Kenton and Campbell County Library, this is less of an issue, although I know I've seen databases come and go in my time, like Reference USA. These things are very powerful, but they carry a high cost to them, and if they don't get used by patrons, they will oftentimes have their subscription terminated. For smaller library systems, for library systems with one branch and 10 or less paid staff, a database might be something that is scrutinized heavily. So some free options for you I want to talk about quickly, and then we'll open up the floor to some Q&A at the end. Want to make sure you're aware of digitallearn.org. Digital Learn's great. It's probably my favorite of this list. It focuses on your computer skills like Microsoft Office and the internet and resume writing. It's video-based. It's a kind of a computerized cartoon avatar tour guide that talks in 7-minute increments and very accessible. One thing I've learned in my time as a librarian is that talking about technology is very difficult. And so sometimes for professional development, I will look at these things like Gale Courses and Digital Learn just to hear how they word things, just to hear how they describe the process of launching an application, saving a file, because sometimes talking about technology is much harder than using it. Digital Learn is videos, and then there's one called gcflearnfree.org that is text-based. You can download files in PDF format that give instructions for these computer competencies like Microsoft Office and internet searching. So again, these two, Digital Learn and GCF Learn Free, are not going to cover the math, social studies, and science on the GED, but just those computer skills folks need to take the test now. You will get a little bit of math and science on Khan Academy, as well as a practice test on 4 tests. I'm going to kind of fly through these because of time, but also because I'm not terribly familiar with them other than the fact that they exist. If I had to guess, I would say that the practice test on Learning Express Library is a lot more accurate than the one on the free 4 tests, but still certainly worth looking at. Some folks also seem to like something called Brain Pop. These are all links you could put on a library's webpage. They're shortcuts you could put on public computers' desktops, or just things you make patrons aware of if you don't have more than 15 minutes to devote to a reference question. when someone asks for computer help. Okay. Shelf talkers. This is something that's very passive, does not require a lot of staff time or resources, but this is something I set in our 300 section of our stacks and told people about our friends, the Adult Learning Center, right there next to the GED books, and you've got the address to the Adult Learning Center on West 8th Street in Newport. That's the kind of thing, you know, you never know. That might change someone's life. That might get them to go through the door of the Adult Learning Center. That might get them to take their GED test. We don't know because those are the people who are oftentimes too shy and reluctant to approach the reference desk and tell us. GED testing posters can also be printed from free from the GED Testing Service website, which you'll see there is gedtestingservice.com. So that's something great to have when you print out your handouts from today. And of course, partner with high schools and alternative schools, community colleges, mentoring programs. At the Campbell County Library, we partnered with a couple. We partnered with Mentoring Plus, as well as Youth Build, and correctional facilities as well. And become a testing center, which is surprisingly easy to do. Just requires a security equipment package, which is in the vicinity of $450. And it says you need 2 computers. I would say more, but maybe it's appointment based. So there's a link there which you can find, and that would be something you could just plead with your library admin on. Just if you want to spearhead it, say I think the library should become a GED testing center. I believe the picture that you see on the slide is Dallas, although I'm not sure. But it is something that some folks are doing and there is precedent for. So if you want to Google Dallas Public Library's website, it's something that you could do if you're not currently doing it. Just a few things in conclusion. Actually, I feel like this would be a good time to take a break and do some Q&A, or if anybody just wants to share what their library is doing. Elizabeth says Khan Academy is fantastic. Okay, yeah, it does, and I'm Digital Learn. I like the digitallearn.org. A little bit of experience with GCF Learn Free. Everybody kind of has their own favorite tools. It's just like web browsers. Some people are Chrome, some people are Microsoft Edge, and some folks still hanging into Internet Explorer. These educational resources all have, they all do similar things, but we like certain things about them. And as Elizabeth points out, Khan Academy is a great place to go for the math and science and more kind of academic side of the GED, not the computer skills like mousing and drop-down menus. So Charlie likes GCF Learn Free. Yeah. She says they have classes. Okay, I haven't looked at their classes because we were fortunate enough to have Gale Courses, but that's definitely something to look at. And the great thing maybe, Charlie says, I'm sure Gale is much better. The great thing about online classes, when you take an online class on GED math, or GED science or social studies, you're also serendipitously practicing your computer skills because while you're taking the class, you're at a computer, you're using the keyboard, you're using the mouse, you're saving files, clicking on links, downloading PDFs, uploading things to, using the browse and attach features. So, one thing I've always told people at the library when they are starting their technology journey, for the folks that come in the library and they've just bought their first laptop, I'll tell them to have fun. A lot of times you hear people say, I only play games. They kind of say it deprecatingly. And I always answer, that's wonderful, because a game like solitaire is wonderful mouse practice. Certainly better practice than you're going to get doing anything else. And of course, we want to target those high interest areas, things that will keep people going back to the computer, not discouraging them. So just a few things in conclusion. Whatever the size of your library, whether you have 40 branches like the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County, or only one branch like some of our rural libraries, there are plenty of ways you can serve GED takers, from active programs like practice tests to passive programming like end caps, shelf talkers, displays, web links. And the effort is worthwhile. Adults who earn their GED increase their earning potential by about $115 a week and are more likely to pursue post-secondary education like college. One of the young men I worked with at the Adult Learning Center, his goal was to be a chef, and he needed his GED as a stepping stone to get into culinary school. Sometimes it's just that. Sometimes it's a stepping stone. It's not the end of their education. It's just the beginning of it. And if you don't like the touchy-feely, altruistic side of it, you can think of how it will benefit your library. It will increase the use of your downloadables in the Overdrive and Libby apps. It'll increase the visits to your library databases that we know cost the library a lot in subscription fees, and increase door counts and patrons coming in the library. And it'll help you by simply doing what libraries always do, which is help our patrons fully participate in society. And finally, since we are librarians and information professionals, I want to show some of the sources I used, as well as those particular library links like the Dallas Public Library and the Sacramento Public Library, which are included in the slide handouts. So it looks like we have 3 minutes left on the clock. Charlie, anything else you want to add?
Yes, Mike, I'm going to go ahead and take a second to go through a couple of final slides, and folks, go ahead and feel free to be typing in any questions or comments that you have for Mike as I go through these. Just want to give a plug to the Institute of Museum and Library Services, who helps sponsor all of our webinars that we're able to give here at KDLA. And I want to just kind of highlight some upcoming webinars that we have. We have a legal reference series, the first part of which is tomorrow afternoon at this time. Part 2 is
and
next Thursday.
Who doesn't dread those legal questions at the reference desk?
Seriously, it's completely intimidating, and I'm happy to say that the instructor in that class is the state law librarian. So she is
great.
Yeah, so it'll be a great class, and it's very entry level. So if you're new to legal reference, you'll get lots of good info.
Yeah. Well, maybe do you still have availability in that one? Maybe I'll sign up for it.
Of course, yes, and it's on our CE calendar, so please help yourself and register. It'll be open until tomorrow morning for registration.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Charlie.
Absolutely. Everybody's more than welcome, and it looks like Elizabeth's looking forward to using this information as well.
Okay, yes. And as she's also mentioned, she's also a board member, which is very important, because a lot of times that's where we get our final say in libraries' purchasing capabilities and databases and other resources.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you very much, Mike, for being with us today. Thank you for your time and your sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you, Charlie, and thanks to everybody who attended today.
And I just want to let everybody know you will, for our live participants, be getting a certificate of attendance for being with us today. I'll be emailing that out to you all, as well as a link to the recording and a link to a survey within just the next day or so. And you can also go ahead and download your own copy of today's slides, full of lots of good information, as well as valuable links that Mike shared with us, and that's available in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. So again, we want to thank our attendees today, and again, thank you to Mike, and You guys have a great afternoon, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Hopefully, Mike, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yes. Bye, everybody.